Hey all you addicts out there, welcome back to another addicted fishing tutorial. My name's Jordan Kniggin. If you guys are new to this page, be sure to go down here, hit subscribe, and hit that little bell notification. We're Addicted Fishing and we come out with different content for anglers like you, whether it's educational, inspirational, or just plain fun, and all kinds of fishing all over the world. So what we're doing today is a little educational piece, and it's something that's been long awaited, and it's something that I'm sure a lot of you need to know, and it's how to use the Mustad Balsa fixed float system, the new addicted float that is out in stores all across the country. So we're gonna go through, we're gonna show you the rod setup that you wanna use, the kind of line, and a few things to put on the end of it, and show you how to actually put this thing on your line and get out there fishing. So stay tuned, it's coming at you right now. First things first, you can use these floats for anything, any kind of adaptation, but what I'm going to show you for today, how you really want to set this up, is for some sort of salmon or steelhead fishing. Whether you be anywhere in the world or here in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to want something in this sort of realm of the rod setup. Again, you can use these for crappie, you can use it for trout, you can use them for any kind of fish across the world, but we're going to talk about the salmon fishing setup, and it still applies in the same theory to every other kind of setup depending on what you're going to be fishing for. Maybe different line size or different hook size, but it's the same idea. So what I have here today is an Okuma Guide Select Pro. This is a 9.9 6 to 12 pound salmon steelhead rod. I have this lined with a C40 Kymar and a 40 pound or a 50 pound braided line. You're going to want that longer 9.9 to a 10.5 foot rod for this kind of fishing, mainly because you're going to want to be able to mend your line properly, and you're going to want to have good line management to successfully fish this float correctly. So that 9.9 rating is proper, that all the way up to a 10.6 once again, and that heavier gauge line, that 30 or 40 pound or 50 pound test, is going to actually sit up on the water a little bit better so that you can go ahead and mend and get proper line management to fish these ways. What I have here on the end is probably the most important part of this whole setup with the fixed float. You can't run the fixed float on your braided line. Let's make that a point right out the gate. You can't use the fixed float on your braided line and actually run your jig or whatever to your braided line. One, because it's too much visibility for the fish. They're going to be spooked by your line, they're not going to bite. And two, your fixed float isn't going to slide well up and down that braided line. It's actually going to burn and cut through the rubber that is used to hold this to your line, and it's going to make that float inefficient. So we're always going to add a bumper of fluorocarbon. And what I have here tied is just a normal blood knot. We have all kinds of knots in our tutorials on addicted fishing. Go down and check it out if you need to see that. This is a blood knot, uni knot, crazy Alberto, anything's gonna work. But I'm gonna add anything from a 10, 15, 20, maybe even a 30 pound bumper line on that, depending on what you're fishing for. If I was gonna fish with this fixed float for a big salmon or something, I could go higher. But what I have here is just a 15 pound fluorocarbon line. What I do is I kind of gauge, you don't want to fish much more leader line than your rod is long. So I'll tie myself about 10 to 12, maybe 13 feet of fluorocarbon bumper on there so that I can adjust my depth to that deep if I'm going to be fishing that kind of deep water on the river that day. So what I have on here is just two big arm lengths. It's about 12 foot for me, about 12 foot in length. And now I'm going to add my fixed float on. So this is the meat and potatoes. This is why we're all watching this video here. First, you're going to open that bad boy up. You're going to give yourself a good clean area to dump this stuff out, because you don't want all your gadgets and goodies going all over the place. And what we have here, again, is the balsa float. Ain't she a beaut? The weights on here is really what's going to dictate what you're fishing. I've found so far with the 2-weight system, unless you're fishing like a 16th ounce jig or something really small, you're always going to want to take one of those brass weights off. Why that is, this is put on there for castability, one, and also fishability, so that it sits properly in the water column, which we'll show you here in just a second. And so that that float is properly fishing, so one, you can see it as it goes down the river, and two, so that it fishes properly through the seams and the boil lines and the eddies, and it's not getting sucked under for no reason. So I'm gonna be fishing a 1/4 ounce jig, whether it be a worm or a jig here today. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill one of these brass deals. I like to keep those in my pocket so that I have extras if I lose them, or if all of a sudden I need one. I'm gonna add my O-ring back on here, just like so. And the next step, I'm gonna add my rubber tubing to my line. So we have these rubber tubings. They give you extra just in case they break or wear out with the sun, which happens from time to time. I'm gonna slide that first one up my bumper line before I put my float on. And you can see what we've done here is that's the main design of these balsa floats. One, we use the balsa wood because it floats so naturally with the current. It's better than any sort of foam float or artificial sort of material that you're going to make a float out of, and it really sits well with the current, and it's proven itself to us time and time again to be more effective, and that's why we've gone with that balsa. But what we've done here is we've drilled a hole and added a little tube alongside that float so that you can actually have a nice run of line and not lose your float. One, if you snag up, or two, if you hook into a big fish or something like that, your float doesn't come flying off there like we've all seen in the past. So what I'm gonna do there, got that rubber tubing, I'm gonna bring it back down. I'm gonna wet the top of my bobber just a little bit so that tubing can go over it. Slide one end on there. A little back and forth motion works pretty good. And just like so, we have the top of that covered. It's important to have that rubber tubing run all the way up to the top, even if it's a little shorter piece of tubing, so that that line doesn't get tangled around the top of your bobber. That's why we've actually made these about 1 inch long like so that it holds right to the top of the float like that, and you're not gonna get any weird tangles as you cast out there. So now that we have the top one done, I'm gonna pull a little bit through here. I'm gonna add my bottom piece of rubber tubing, just like so. Slide it down to the bottom of the float, and just that simple. Wet that down a little bit more. As you guys can see, it's one of the more simple setups out there. Quicker and easier. The times that you're gonna wanna use these setups are in shallower water. You're not gonna wanna fish anything over about 10 foot deep. And a lot of times it's much more of a stealthy approach. When I find low, clear water or runs where the fish are only sitting in a couple feet of water, these fixed float systems work so much better because you can allow yourself to fish a foot deep and have a very natural presentation on the surface, yet keep that presentation in front of those fish the whole time without disturbing them at all and getting a perfect drift with that balsa float. So now the really fun part, the real potatoes at the end of here. A couple different options out there are gonna be either some sort of jig system or some sort of worm system. I have just a couple little examples here. Of course, they come in all variation of colors. These are our addicted steelhead worms. They come in all different colors from all different ranges. They're all 6-inch worms, so we actually cut them down quite a bit depending on what and where you're fishing in the Northwest or in the world. And also we have our Sink It series jigs that pair super well with these fixed floats. And these are just the normal Sink It series jigs. This is the 1/8 ounce. They come in 1/16, quarter, and all the different ranges of colors. We spent a while developing the colors and all the different styles and all the different SKUs so that each of you anglers out there with a different preference can have a jig that's gonna work well for you. What I'm gonna do here first, I'm gonna put the worm on first just to show you guys. These are our addicted jig heads as well. These are the worm heads. These are designed with a KVD keeper and a flat head so that when we do cut these worms off and we downsize them, they pair up perfectly. They don't add any extra profile to that worm and they work really, really well. We've actually elongated that shank a little bit too so that you don't get short bit as much. And it was really a great combination for catching steelhead, and big steelhead at that. It's one of my favorite ways to catch trophy fish. I'm gonna do just a normal fisherman's knot here, wet that down, just like so. Bammy. So now what I'm gonna add is just one of my favorite colors, the old pink and white Sink It series jig. Kind of really these worms and these jigs are what we design these floats for specifically. You can chandelier a bead below these balsa floats. You can do a lot of different presentations. You could fish bait if you wanted to, but the idea of that balsa float is to fish certain kinds of water like you see behind us. This perfect steelhead run. I don't want any weight showing. I don't want a lot of my float showing. I want a nice natural presentation with the balsa float and have that jig dangling down there in the sunlight ever so perfectly so that we can get a good presentation at these fish. So now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna make a few casts. I'm gonna do a couple drifts by the side of the boat and show you what a proper drift with one of these floats should look like. You want it sitting straight up and down, which I'll go into in a second. You want it sitting at the right depth, which adds and subtracts that weight. And you guys wanna see that right presentation so that you can successfully fish this. So the first thing we're gonna talk about, and we can talk about it without even casting here, is how you want your float to look as you're fishing it on the water. That is the key. The beauty of the balsa is it registers bottom very well, and it registers any kind of bite or anything else very well because it's so neutrally buoyant with that surface of the water. So what it wants to look like here, what a perfect drift is gonna look like, and what a perfect depth is gonna look like, or maybe even too shallow of a depth, is just like so. You're gonna cast out, you're gonna hit that seam line or wherever you're fishing, and that float's gonna sit just underneath that line. The top of that M should be sticking out perfectly. If I have too much weight on that and I have too many of these rings on here, the brass rings, it's gonna sit too deep. You're only gonna see about 1 inch of the top of the float, and you're gonna be able to tell as soon as it gets about 30 feet away from you on the boat, you're not gonna be able to see that float at all. So you're gonna wanna reel in, you're gonna wanna subtract that weight. Sometimes you may not even need those brass rings if you're using like a 1/4 ounce Sink It series jig or a 1/4 ounce head like in high water or something with your balsa float. So that's what it should look like. You guys, I'm gonna do it again just so you can see that perfect depth. And for me, I am pretty religious on always starting shallow and working my way deep. So you can tell by the way that's floating, it's sitting straight up and down. It's going the exact same speed as the current. You can tell we're not too deep. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set my depth a little bit too deep. So you can see instantly as I throw it in there and I have too much depth, that float will take a long time to fall and it'll instantly be pointing downriver. So if through the drift you can tell instantly that that float is pointing downriver, you're gonna make minor adjustments. And that's the beauty of this float. Because it does register bottom so well, you can really make those small adjustments, those 3 to 4 inch adjustments to adjust that depth to where you're gonna be fishing perfectly 6 inches to a foot off the bottom, right in those fish's strike zone. So as you see, if you look back here on this next cast, I'll do it one more time, I'm still just a little bit too deep. I'm gonna make that minor adjustment and I'm gonna allow myself to be fishing that proper depth. So you're just a little too deep, it's still pointing downriver just a little bit. I'm gonna reel that bad boy in, adjust it just that much more, another 3 or 4 inches. Get it back out there. And that should be the ticket there. Just like that. Now you see how that thing's sitting straight up and down. I'm hitting bottom maybe once every 5 to 10 feet as I'm going down along that area, and I'm fishing perfectly right in those fish's face. All right, everybody, so that is the Ball Sub Mustad and Addicted fixed float setup. If you haven't already tried this, again, it works great for any species. Whether you're gonna use it for trout fishing in a lake, trout fishing in a river, walleye fishing, catfishing, panfish, anything is gonna work well with the right amount of the brass weights on that float to counteract the kind of presentation that you have below it. So this is a great way to catch salmon and steelhead. If you guys haven't ever tried a Balls of Float, go out and try one of these Addicted floats and let us know what you think. Be sure to comment down in the comments below whether or not you can get your hands on these. And if you can't, go to your local tackle shop, ask them to get it for you, ask them to call Mustad and get some of these Ball Sub fixed floats in the stores so you guys can use them and get out there and have fun and catch more fish. Thank you so much for tuning in today, you guys. If you can, go down here. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, leave a little comment below, and let us know what you want to see next. We have all kinds of products, all kinds of cool things to show you guys, so drop a comment below with what you guys want to see. We appreciate you tuning in so much this week. You guys have a great one. Stay fishy, and we'll see you out there.